Greetings, beautiful people. Welcome back to Find XYZ. If you are new to this channel, kindly subscribe. We are still on the road towards 2026. Let's try this problem. If triangle ABC is an isosceles triangle such that vector AB is equal to vector BC and point M is on vector AC such that the magnitude of vector AC is equal to the magnitude of vector MC, which is also equal to the ratio 1:1. We are tasked to show that vector BA plus vector BC is equal to twice of vector BM. Let's dive in. I'll begin by sketching the isosceles triangle ABC. Now we have been told that this is an isosceles triangle, so vector AB, so A to B, is the same as vector B to C. And then we also told that there's a point on vector AC that divides the triangle into two equal parts because the ratio is 1:1. I'll locate point M on vector AC and I'll draw a line to connect it to B. So this is point M. Now we are told that the magnitude of vector AM is equal to the magnitude of vector MC. So I also indicate that this A to M is the same as M to C. And what is the magnitude? 1:1. Then we have been tasked to show that vector BA plus vector BC will give us twice of vector BM. Also, I would like to start with vector BM. So I write vector BM is the same as, now moving from B to M, we can move from B to A and then from A to M. So we are starting at B and we are ending at M. So we are starting at B and we are ending at M. So we can use this route. We can pass B to A because we are starting at B. So vector BA. Then we'll move from A to M. So A to M. We began at B and we are ending at M. But watch this. What is vector AM? We know that vector A to M is 1 out of the whole vector AC. So we are moving in this direction. So we can say vector A to M, since this is 1, this is 1 out of, what is the whole vector? So 1 plus 1 will give us 2. So 1 out of 2 of what vector? A to C. That is the bigger vector. So A to C. In place of vector AM, I can write it as half of vector AC. So let's substitute that. So I can write vector BM is equal to vector BA plus half of vector AC. Let's do some simple simplification. I want to eliminate the fraction, so I multiply each term by 2. So this will be twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BA plus vector AC. Then what can I do? I want to show that twice of vector BM is equal to vector BA plus vector BC. Now I have twice of this. Now what is vector AC? Vector AC, moving from A to C. Watch this. Moving from A to C, I can move from A to B. Then I can move from B to C. So I've achieved that. I want to move from A to C, so I can move from A to B and then from B to finally C. So in place of vector AC, we can write it as vector AB plus vector BC. So let's write that. So twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BA plus, what is vector AC? That is vector AB plus vector BC. Then watch this. This is BA. I have finally achieved BC because we have BC here. But what is AB? Now vector AB is the same as, if I want to move from A to B, is it the same as moving from B to A? No, I've changed the direction, so I have to bring negative to show that I've changed the direction. So in place of vector AB, I can write it as negative vector BA. They are the same. So I'm going to replace vector AB with negative BA. So twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BA. Then in place of AB, I write it as negative BA plus BC. Now we have vector BA, we have vector BA, but this is 2 and this is 1. So when we do the subtraction, we have twice of vector BM being equal to 2 minus 1 will give us just 1. So we are left with just BA plus vector BC, which is exactly what we wanted to show. We can use an alternative route. Let's go back to the triangle. You realize that in the first approach, I use this route to M. I can also use this route. So let's use that one. So I can say vector B to M is the same as moving from B to C and then from C to M. Am I not at M? That is the target, so I am at M. So vector CM is also 1 out of the whole vector, but this time we are moving in the opposite direction. We are moving from C to M, so we are moving in this direction. So it is 1 out of the whole vector. This time it is C to A because I'm moving in the opposite direction, so vector CA. So in place of vector CM, I will substitute half of vector CA. So vector BM is equal equal to vector BC plus half of vector CA. I can do algebra by multiplying each vector by 2 to eliminate the fraction. So I have twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BC plus vector CA. Then we want to achieve something. We want to achieve BA BC. So what is vector CA? So we can also express C to A as if I want to move from C to A, I can move from C to B, then from B to A. You see the direction? Good. So in place of vector CA, I'm going to write CB plus BA. So twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BC plus, now in place of CA, I'll write vector CB plus vector BA. Now I have BC, I have CB. You see they have something in common. So it means that I can express vector CB as, can I write it as BC? No, they are not the same. For them to be equal, I have to bring negative. So in place of CB, I write it as negative BC. So I have twice of vector BM is equal to twice of vector BC minus vector BC plus vector BA. So because I want it to match what you are given, I'll bring vector BA first. So twice of vector BM is equal to vector BA will come first, then 2 of BC and then minus of BC. That will give us plus vector BC. Now we have been able to establish that twice of vector BM is the same as vector BA plus vector BC. But we can also use another solution. So you realize that this is vector BM, this is also vector BM. We can add the two vectors. So let's do that. So we can say vector BM is equal to BA plus half of AC. Then we can also say that vector BM is also the same as B to C plus half of vector CA. So let's put these two vectors together. BM, this is BM. So BM plus BM will be equal to, what is BM? BM is this. So we have BA plus half of AC. Then what is another BM? That is BC plus of half of CA. Then BM plus BM will give us 2BM. It's equal to, then we have BA BC. So let's bring that BA plus BC. Then we have half of AC plus half of CA. Watch something. You realize that CA is the same as AC, but for them to be the same, I have to negate it. So in place of CA, I can write this as 2BM is equal to BA plus BC plus half of AC. Then in place of CA, I can write it as negative. So now I have minus half of AC. So this is positive, this is negative. You can clearly see that A to C is moving in this direction and C to A is also moving in this direction. Is that okay? So it will cancel each other. So this vector will go to what? 0. So we are left with twice of vector BM is equal to BA plus vector BC. There's also another way of solving this. Let me know in the comment section. That is all I have for you for today. If you found this helpful, kindly leave a comment, share this video to all your friends, and tell us where you are watching us from. Until then, I'm out.